What I wanted to talk about this time, and we have plenty of time, which is good, but we're doing some changes on the SharePoint Framework default templates, and I will explain what those are and what are we planning to do, and I'm hopefully getting some feedback in the discussion channel as well. But before we go there, just to clarify as well, so SharePoint Framework is really intended to be the easiest way to build your enterprise solution in Microsoft 365. So of course, if you are an ISV, and then you have an existing SaaS solution, then you might not build everything using the SharePoint Framework model, but you might want to take advantage of SharePoint Framework, for example, for Viva connections. And there's multiple other areas where that still makes a lot of sense. So it is a really cool way of extending, and not just SharePoint, even though that name applies to that. So, and if you think about the SharePoint Framework as a whole, it provides automatic single sign-on because you're already signed in to the actual application where it's being, what are you using. It has the automatic hosting, so you don't have to worry about setting up the Azure and applications and all of that. And this is a huge thing for, especially for enterprises, where getting an Azure application installed or running in an Azure is not necessarily an easy thing for developers to do. It has the consistent developer experience using the web stack development model, so using TypeScript, React, and Angular, and all that stuff. So really, really consistent way of extending then Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and Viva. Now, kind of intros and recap slides, but this is a relatively new one, which is trying to explain where the SharePoint Framework can be actually used. So we kind of are formalizing this in a slightly new way. So we can use SharePoint Framework regardless of the name called SharePoint to extend Microsoft Teams. And we want to make sure that that experience from extending Microsoft Teams using SharePoint Framework, given all of the advantages which we went through the previous line, is as smooth and as easy as possible. So just by running, creating a project and doing basically an F5, things will just have to work and they have to look beautiful. And that's what we're doing as part of these new designs and new elements, what we're working on right now. You can, of course, use also SharePoint Framework to customize Microsoft Viva connections. So currently, my SharePoint Framework is the only extensibility model for Microsoft Viva. There are other options coming. There's other options coming from Microsoft Graph to take advantage of the Microsoft Viva platform. But SharePoint Framework is really the way of doing the UX level extensibility. So creating cards for the Viva connection mobile, creating web parts and extensions, and modifying the experiences within the Viva connection desktop experience. And then, of course, not forgetting about the SharePoint. A lot of our customers, there's I can't say the latest numbers, but there's hundreds of millions of users monthly basis using SharePoint, and you can, of course, extend the SharePoint experiences with SharePoint Framework, and it is the recommended way of doing that in the SharePoint. So, if possible, don't use SharePoint adding model. That's not future proven viable model. SharePoint Framework is, and then alternative options. Now, one of the problems that we've been having a SharePoint Framework, which the engineering didn't really thought about until pretty recently, or well, we didn't spend time too much on this until pretty recently, is that we did actually have pretty horrible, and you can quote me on that one, horrible experience as you created a new web part, or you created a new Microsoft Teams tab or an experience, and that doesn't look really good. So the UX is outdated. There was no section background support, which is a, well, in quotes, relatively new capability in SharePoint Online. No, it isn't. It's been over there for a while, and there's a supportive way of doing that. But the default template, which was coming out as you created a project, didn't show you how to do that. It had really limited Microsoft Teams support. So if you have a look on the picture right now there, fonts are wrong. And it actually says, welcome to SharePoint inside of the Microsoft Teams. That's pretty awkward, actually. And it wasn't the theme aware. So if you're changing the theme in the SharePoint, or if you're changing the theme inside of the Microsoft Teams, it didn't react on those changes. So you as a developer always needed to do additional work and additional extensibility to make all of that work. And that's why what we want to do is that we want to reset the design and the default experience. So making it really easy for developers as they create a new solution, a new project using the SharePoint framework, and they can easily use that in Microsoft Teams or in SharePoint, and it will support all of the latest capabilities, and you can easily control how that support is also being done. And this work and design is currently ongoing, so we're not quite there. This is a preview. This will not be in the immediately following up on SharePoint Framework 1.13, which is coming up relatively soon, but this will be part of the SharePoint 1.14. I'll come back on the timelines in a second. Now let's have a look on what it means in practice, as we do have plenty of time to do that. So first of all, let's have a look on the existing experience, so we can actually kind of remind ourselves how, quotes, horrible the experience is. But to be fair, this is 6 years old design. The whole point of this one was basically just focus on showing a web widget on a web part, and then if you go to the edit web part experience, you can modify the property, and then obviously it's then reflected in the UX here as well. Now, the challenge of doing this, and as we didn't refresh this experience, is that it does not support section background, it does not support theming. Let me call this plain sample. And what it means is that if I, for example, set the background theme or the look and feel in here to be something a bit more complicated, like dark yellow, it didn't do that properly. Well, it actually did adjust some of the settings, but for example, the section background, all of that stuff wasn't really working in a best possible way. It also actually has some spacing issues, it scales differently and all of that stuff. More importantly for us as well, as we are targeting Microsoft Teams and really want to make the Microsoft Teams super easy to extend using SharePoint Framework, the experience in the Microsoft Teams was pretty horrible. So here I'm in the Microsoft Viva experience in the Teams, but let me actually create here. I think I have a plain sample. It's really, really bad. It actually says, welcome to SharePoint, but I'm in Teams. That doesn't make any sense. The experience is not quite optimal. And then starting to optimize this always took some time. It didn't even have the right fonts available as a template. So we wanted to modify this. So right now the design is then intended to be somewhat this following. So let me actually walk that through as well. Let me go into create a new page in SharePoint, and we can have a look on that modernized template. Let me get rid of that. Let me add in here. And if I only would Hello World new design, that's what it is. So we're looking into doing a bit more descriptive web part, and I'll come back on the code and I'll show some of the pieces in the code, but that part has not yet been fully finalized. So there's going to be changes on that. But basic idea here is that it's a fully section color aware. It actually tells you you're running in a SharePoint page. That's going to be flipped that you're running in Teams. So it shows the detection of which platform you're running. The picture is about to be changed as well until at the time this will be shipped. So it will be, of course, much more inclusive as well. So we'll add some additional things over there as well. And we provide additional set of links, additional set of details for the developers to get started. And of course, the experience is theme aware. So in the same way as with the old one, which was fixed at some point, you can actually flip between the themes, and it is actually automatically flipping the pictures. It is flipping the rendering in the right way, which is really, really cool. So everything works without any problems, and it understands the section background experience as well. But more importantly, as we go, well, not more importantly, there's so many hundreds of millions of people using SharePoint Online, and the extensibility model SharePoint Framework is being used by tens of millions of users every single month, which is really, really cool. But as we are moving into the Teams, and we want to make sure that the Teams experience, so you can actually create Microsoft Teams personal applications and tabs easily using SharePoint Framework, and also messaging extensions, we want to make sure that the default template looks clean, and it has the environmental detection on it. So it actually detects automatically that it's running in Teams. It has all of the needed details in it. And of course, if I'm flipping the settings in Teams to be, for example, dark, we can actually say that it's reflecting those settings in the themes as well. So the default output as we create the project from Yeoman Generator is giving you the same experience, which will then adapt automatically depending on are you in Teams or are you in the SharePoint framework. Now, good comment from Dragan. I will get back on that one in a second. But this is what we're doing right now. So the ongoing debate and ongoing discussion, well, not a debate, because I think everybody agrees on that, is that we have a draft version and a beta version available of this as part of the 1.13 beta to beta 20, which is almost on a release candidate for 1.13, which is coming quite soon as well. We, however, realized that as we are adding all of these capabilities to the default templates, which is actually visible in here, it's going to add quite a lot of additional code. And then the discussion was that some of the MVPs, which is great feedback and completely valuable feedback, is that there's quite a lot of additional text and additional things to always get rid of when you create a new web part and you clean up the outcome from the human generator. So what we're now looking into doing is simplifying, for example, this on-init structures and on-init capabilities, so that the baseline theming, baseline section background, baseline rendering options are being much more easily available for the developers. So with few lines of code, we can get started on creating a web part which will adapt based on the environment. It will adapt on the section background and the themes and all of that stuff, regardless how you're using then SharePoint or in the Teams side. But like I said, right now, this is what we're getting from the beta 20, and it is still a beta. So we're going to clean up some of this stuff. We're going to make it easier. We're going to reduce the level of information which people are having in here, so that we make it easier for the developers to take advantage of the theme handling and all of that stuff if they prefer to do so. You can, of course, always basically drop out from supporting that theming option if you want to do that. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that, but again, maybe in certain cases it's understandable. But as an example, this kind of a overriding and with a hard-coded styles, this is not going to be there as we move into the release of this particular new version of the templates. Right now, if you are, however, interested on actually having a discussion on this, we would love to get your input. So let me actually go in here and let me jump in here. So we do have in the SP Dev Docs issue list, there is 2 discussion notes related on this discussion, one with 29 comments, a lot of input over there, and then one with Stefan Bauer related on the HTML and styling on the web part template feedback. Now, like I said, right now we're looking into basically, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? And how we're going to do that. And just to be clear, and thank you, David, for sharing the link as well. Of course, as we are rolling out these changes, we are updating all of the tutorials, all of the documentation as part of these things. Now, I think I will jump back on the slide just to summarize this one, and then I'll answer the questions, and then we can do a in general Q&A in the end. So for now, we're collecting feedback for this, so making sure that people are happy with the outcome. We do understand that every single time you move or change anything as the default experience, some people will react on it, but we want to make sure that it's an easily available option for you to take advantage. So as we were unable to finalize that fully for 1.13, this is now postponed to 1.14, which is intended to go beta a week after 1.13, which is intended to come out within weeks. I think the weeks or days, maybe that's the right way of saying that. But we're really looking into optimizing the code level, so making sure that the output will look somewhat, as we can see in these screens. The picture will be a bit changed to be more inclusive and diverse, but that's the only adjustments what we're looking into doing there. And of course, we're looking into having fully documented patterns and default experiences available. So really calling out how things can be done and why they can be done and all of that stuff. And we'll definitely link additional links as we are adding those documentations in. I'll react some of the comments because we do have a few minutes still on the on the schedule. So Trakan, if you said that if it would be great if you can build documentation page that explains the code in what's the new default templates and that links to that documentation page inside of the Learn More links. That is a good feedback. Absolutely, that is the intention as well. Kim is basically saying that the new default template is too simple. Yeah, this is the developer part. So some people are saying that, of course, the existing templates is super simple. It's really, really, really uber simple. As we introduced this additional layout, some people are saying that this is too complex. And some people are then saying, like Kim, with completely valid feedback, is saying that it's too simple. So there's multiple sides on this. We're trying to find the right compromise based on your feedback. So please participate on that discussion and provide the feedback in the discussion list and discussions in the GitHub. So we will get your input on the design. Now, what we're trying to do basically here is that we want to make sure that the first experience for creating new web parts for developers will be clean. It will support all of the target environments, and it will support the theming and color settings and all of that by default without you being forced to do additional set of coding, additional set of set changes. So simplifying that first experience. Now, we understand that we might want to look into more advanced options in the future. So we might want to introduce more complex templated outputs, reference samples, maybe something which you can run as a create a new project, maybe an Visual Code extension for SharePoint Framework, where you can start by creating from existing sample, which will have a much more complex scenario. So all of that is open for discussion, but really looking into making this better for you. Existing tutorials will be updated. This will not affect any of the existing solutions. So basically, all of your existing solutions will be as they are. So this will be part of the new versions. And if you're upgrading your existing solution, we will not change any of your code. So it's up to you then to basically modify the needed code on there. I'm quickly looking into good note from DeAndrea on the regions. Good vote on that one. And it's in 1.14. Started template. Thank you for that one, Trakan.
We did have a question from Alan regarding the SharePoint Framework ability to do Office add-ins. Is that out of developer preview, or is that still on a timeline for future release?
Now I'm missing the. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm missing the. Oh, there we go.
It's a little further up. We can use the SharePoint Framework to build Teams apps, but is the Build an Outlook side panel app functionality out of beta yet?
So unfortunately, the creating of Office add-ins is not out of beta. So if I put my SharePoint Framework engineering hat on, we would love to do that. Unfortunately, our other counterparts, so the Office extensibility people, have been really, really busy on other areas. So they haven't really invested yet, at least, on making that experience optimal. From our perspective, we would love to provide the extensibility option for Office add-ins with SPFx, because it is really simple, and the automatic hosting and the web stack tooling is just spot on what we need in the Office add-ins as well, quite often. But unfortunately, again, no changes there, because we are still having internal negotiations of making that support happen for Office client. Not an optimal situation for sure.
And then I see Christian had a request for a SPFx sample connecting to SQL. We just posted a link if you want to actually share that as a suggestion into one of the many forums for that. I'm sure there are a number of community contributors who would love to take up that challenge and post something out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Ashar had a good question. What is the connection between SPFx web part and a Viva connection card in terms of showing the card in Teams? As we do have 8 minutes, Brian, if you don't mind, let me use 4 minutes or 3 minutes on this one.
Sure.
Now, I will flip back on my demo environment, and I will quickly explain how things are working. So this one here is technically well, I think the right term to use here is a web part, even though it's a personal application. But technically, you're creating a panel, which is inheriting from a web part, and then you get this experience. Now, in the Viva connections, we are building a bit different component types. So this one here is the Viva connection running in my dev environment, which doesn't seem to be updating properly, and that shouldn't actually have an impact. Let me refresh. And I just prefer this to be white. So let me do that. And there we go. We can see those individual dashboards. That is, for example, a custom ACE card, so active adaptive card component. So ACE is adaptive card component. These are new component types. So technically what we're seeing here is a web part called dashboard, web part, which is then rendering the dashboard, which is the same experience what we will be exposing in the mobile experience. It is a new component type. So you're using SharePoint Framework to create those, but you're not creating a web part. So they are not web part component types. In general, in the Microsoft Teams, if I a bit zoom out here, so we'll see more, we can build custom experiences as the cards, which are then targeted for the mobile experience, and they can connect to the Microsoft Teams applications, or they can or bots, or of course they can hit Microsoft Graph APIs, which is the right way of accessing any information. But you can also create web parts, and these are basically then custom experiences which you can use to extend the desktop experience in the Viva connection, which we can see right now here inside of the Microsoft Teams. Hopefully that a bit clarifies the situation. I can quickly go also in here. If I go to the root, this is technically the same view as what we saw inside of the Microsoft Teams as the Viva connection, but now we're looking to that view inside of the SharePoint without the Microsoft Teams shell on top of it. And we can see the same dashboard card here. I can go to the dashboard details. I can start modifying the dashboard, adding additional things, additional cards, depending on what has been installed to this environment. So I can add additional things, additional options, and all of that stuff. That was a bad demo because it has an issue. So anyway, and as I publish this one, the modifications, then the same design and a dashboard which I just designed here is available inside of my company root portal, or in the company Viva connection experience inside of the Microsoft Teams. And then this dashboard is also exposed in a mobile experience. And that's kind of the connection between the different layers. There's a lot of let's say, dependencies, and it might be quite confusing, but we'll definitely get more documentation, video guidance, demos, and all of that available on the Viva as well. I think we have a Viva development experience scheduled for next week, so that should be good. But I think that's it. Let's actually jump back on Brian on your computer.
Excellent. Thank you for taking the extra time to talk through the unplanned demos, but we do appreciate your time there, Vesa.
Thank you.